Welcome everybody to another episode of the Grime Time segment. Due to the overwhelming success of the first Grime Time segment, weathering the scale trains SD40-2, I decided to do a second one. Not expecting it to do quite as well as the first one did, but if it gets half the views that the first one did, I'll be really ecstatic. So the piece that I've chosen to utilize for this new Grime Time segment is a piece of rolling stock that you see constantly throughout the United States, and that's a covered hopper. This is the one type of car that you see constantly. This particular one, not quite as much, but this is the one we'll be utilizing for the weathering. I've got a prototype picture that I'll throw up in just a second here. Okay, so as is the case with any sort of weathering project, the first step naturally is to go ahead and get the locomotive or piece of rolling stock clear coated. I've already gone ahead and done that using the same techniques I show in the first of these videos, that weathering the locomotive. It's just a simple can of spray paint, and the types of weathering powders and stuff we're going to be using are very similar to the ones that we used in that project as well. The first step now in the actual weathering is going to come by way of fading the piece of rolling stock down here. As you can see, it's already white, so it's going to be very difficult to fade down. But what I have here is I have my silver Tamiya weathering powder, and we're going to try to use some of that and see how it turns out. You know, half of weathering, in all honesty, is really just winging it and going back and covering up your mistakes. So we'll see what happens when we do that. It's very simple to use this stuff. The Tamiya has the adhesive built in, as I mentioned in the first segment. As you'll have seen in the prototype pictures, these kind of stripes on this car are very faded down. There's a bunch of just different rust flecks and stuff. And when we get into the flecks of rust and stuff, that's when we're going to get into a different technique than we've used ever before in the initial Grime Time. So here we go. Let's get this started just with the initial layer. It's going to be kind of hard to see with the lighting in here. It's not really the greatest, but we'll do our best to make sure that everything gets looking its best. A little more here. I always like to blow off the extra excess powder here. So you can kind of start to see that that everything's starting to get a little faded. I'm going to go ahead and do this probably about 2 or 3 times before it really starts to become noticeable how faded down it is. So we'll get back to you at that point. Alright, so I continued on with the Tamiya powders for a little while, but I realized I really wasn't getting the desired effect that I wanted. So what I did is I went ahead and got some emery paper. This is a really fine grit sandpaper, and I already did the other side. I started just going at the stripes with that in order to get the desired effect. Turned out great over there. I'll show you in a second, but I'm just going to show you you know, how I'm going about doing that on this side here, and I'm going to try to, you know, get it so that I can see it and you guys still can as well here. So excuse the kind of cockeyed view here, but you're just going to really lightly kind of just in a horizontal fashion, go back and forth on those stripes. Make sure, just be careful not to do much more than just on the stripe. And you'll start to see, a little bit of white peeking through. By the time you're done, there'll be a little bit more white peeking through and everything. And you'll really start to see, the blue start to really truly fade and take on a more weathered look, which is what we're really striving for here. So as I go here, you'll continue to see more. But just give me 1 second here. We'll be right back, and by the time you're seeing this again, it'll look completely different. Alright, so now we're back. We're done with the sanding part, and as you can see now, it's really starting to take on a completely different look than it did at the initial beginning of this video. So now that we're done with the sanding, though, we do need to go back in with the Tamiya powder once more, as we've obviously basically, sanded off pretty much all of the work we've done. And we're just going to go back in with that Tamiya powder and kind of blend the now completely, white into the blue and the surrounding colors as well. So we'll get started on that here. And again, it's going to be a little time consuming. This is probably going to take a few coats, a few coats of clear coat, a few applications of this Tamiya powder before it really starts to look blended in the way it's supposed to. And we may actually start to use some of our pastel chalks as well in order to achieve the desired effect. Alright, so I'm going to get through the rest of the Tamiya powder, and then we'll pick it back up before I start using the pastel chalks here. Alright, so I'm just about all set now with the Tamiya powders, I think. Now we're going to get into using the chalk pastels, just to give it all around more even look of the fading. I'm going to focus mostly on the white color here. We will put a little bit of the gray color in here as well, but we're mostly focused on getting those blue stripes faded down in a nice even manner, and then we'll go back with another layer of like the grime. There's a little bit on there. Might be a little hard to tell with the lighting down here. I've done the best I can with that aspect, and there will end up being a little bit of grime coloring in with this mix that I'm making right now, just because that's the color that was in there the last go around. But let's see what happens here. And again, with the pastels, this is the part that's really the most time consuming, unfortunately, just because this is not an adhesive based powder, so you have to kind of go in multiple times through. But you can kind of already see and get a good idea of how well this is doing of fading down those two stripes as of now. When you clear coat these, though, the problem is that a lot of this powder will just fly right off, so it'll take a good 2-3 coats of this to really actually get this color once it's done. But once it's done, this is kind of how we want it to look. I'll finish that up, we'll get it to that point, and then we'll get into kind of the little detail rust spots of how we're going to do this, and then we'll talk about the trucks as well and what we're going to do with those. Alright, so after about, I'd say 5 coats of that mixture of pan pastels, we're really starting to get the desired effect on those stripes. I think we're good on that. So the next step now is going to be to come back in with a different mixture of these, and we're just going to kind of get a layer of light grime going on the car. It doesn't look like it on the prototype pictures, but really when it comes down to it, most of these cars do have a good layer of grime on them. We'll use a lot of this powder on the wheels as well, just to get it looking more prototypical as far as that goes. This is just a mixture of a couple of different browns, a rust color, and we're just going to do probably 1, maybe 2, if that, layers of this mixture just to get that grime going. The primary focus here again is going to be up here where it's still, I mean, pretty much white, and then the trucks as well. But we will just do a quick dusting of the car itself here. And, you know, once this is all clear coated, it won't look quite as brown as it does now. Get a little bit up here as well. And once we're done as well too, we'll probably come back in with another coat of just white to kind of fade down some of the rust spots we're going to put on this thing, amongst other things. So the brown color we're seeing now is not really that big of a deal, as it'll really kind of fade away as we continue to work on the car here. So I'm going to get the rest of this done, starting with these wheels here. We'll come back in and focus on the wheels a little bit more later, but we'll get a little bit on them as of now. That's really all you can do with these. These are 36-inch wheel sets. I have a jig to weather 33-inch, but I don't have one for 36s, so we're gonna just kind of leave them and focus on the trucks themselves. But stay tuned and we'll be right back with a little bit more. Okay, so we're all set with that one single layer of grime. Now what we're gonna get into is the rust spots. And before I do that, I did want to just mention the prototype picture, as you saw, is an acfx car. It's a patched car. I'm not going to go over the patching aspect in this video just because that's a little bit more in depth. I'm trying to keep this a little bit more basic for people just learning and that type of thing. I may do in another Grime Time segment a patch video later down the road. This thing will get patched, but I'm just not going to do it on camera. So now what we're going to get into is the kind of just rust spots that are all over this car, these teeny tiny ones, the one that's like straight down the middle of the two stripes, that sort of thing. And so for the really dark rust spots, the first thing you want to do is actually put down a black line, which once it's covered with the rust color actually makes it show up a lot better. So we're going to do that now. I believe we'll start on this side of the car because this is kind of the side that in the picture has that really bad gash right down the side of it. And what I'm going to do in order to hopefully achieve that desired effect is use some sort of a straight edge just to kind of make sure that that gash that's there, that was caused obviously by something going straight down the middle of the car, is accurately represented. So we're going to take this black paint here and kind of using this piece of paper as a guide, kind of try to recreate that gash that runs down the center here. And again, it really doesn't have to be perfect. You're really just putting down a base coat for that brown, and most of this black is going to end up covered by that in the long run. So, and what I'm using here, this is a very fine kind of toothpick type brush. I picked this up at Hobby Lobby. I don't recall the type of brush that they called it. I'd have to check. So anyway, once I'm done with all the gash here, I'll show you kind of a couple other areas that I'm going to be putting rust spots. Up around the corner here, there's going to be some, and I don't, when it comes to these type of things, I don't usually do them exactly how the car is. I just kind of try to get the areas that are rusted out in that car as well. Just like I said, the general area, which just seems to be kind of up in here a little bit, kind of up around the stanchions here. So we'll probably just dab a little bit on a couple of those. And then once that's all done, we'll come back in with the brown color. I'm going to finish doing the gash up here now. It's not going to take a whole lot. This car is in relatively good shape for its age. I mean, I believe these things were built in the 80s. So we'll get those darker spots taken care of, and then we'll come back in with just brown and do the kind of lighter rust spots as well. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Alright, so now we've given the black a little bit of time to dry, and we're going to come back in and put on a layer of brown on a lot of these spots, just to give it that rust color and everything. I have a metallic brown here that I'm going to use that kind of gives it a little bit of a glint too. Once it's all, finished weathering and everything, it looks really nice once it's done. What I ended up doing for this gash down the side is, rather than using this, I got a couple pieces of masking tape and just left a little tiny sliver of space in between, and ended up using that. As you saw, as I was trying to do it on the recording, wasn't working out too well. So that's now all taken care of. Now what we're going to do, though, is come back over top of the black in all these different spots, and just go over it with the brown. And as you can see, it really does start to really take a good texture once you layer over the black with the brown and everything. I'm not going to do this gash on camera because I really just need it to be facing myself so that I can see it well enough to do. But I'm just kind of showing you what all we do for these little spots here. You kind of just dab on the paint as you go. Usually ends up looking pretty good. So just get these few done. I'll go ahead and start on the stripe off camera, and we'll meet back with you right after that. Alright, so as you can see now, the brown is now done on the gash. There's a little bit of brown on all the black spots. I'm going to do just a couple of really little teeny tiny flecks down here of rust. And then the other thing you'll notice, and one thing that's a very big noticeable thing on the prototype, is just some simple black graffiti down here that I've tried to replicate the best I can. It's not exact, but I think it's, for the most part, pretty good. So now I'm just going to go back in and, oop, that's a little dry. I'm just going to go back in and kind of do a little bit of basic brown around here towards the bottom, just dabbing it on. Once this car's all wrapped up, really this is not going to be super noticeable once it's all said and done. So, like I said, just a few different various places throughout the car. You'll notice that it's got a little bit of rust here and there, and that's about it. Okay, so stay tuned. I'm going to get this clear coated, and then we'll come back with one of the final steps before we move on to the trucks. Okay, so now that we're completely done with paint, we're going to go back in with the Tamiya powder once more, and just kind of touch up around all of the various different rust spots, and kind of blend it in with the rust-colored Tamiya powder into the remainder of the car. Just kind of lightly brush it on. This really finishes out the rust, covers up any of that black that's still showing for the most part, and really helps, tie the car together. Once this is done, we'll then go in with another coat of white just to fade it down a little bit more, get rid of a little bit of this extra grime that we really don't want that's a little excessive. It'll kind of cover that up a little bit more. And once that's done, the only thing left to do is the trucks, which in fact I'm actually going to work on a little bit with this rust-colored Tamiya powder. Really just get the truck looking a little grimy. That's really the best you can do with these because of the fact that they're 36-inch metal wheels, and I don't have the jig to weather those. So anyway, we'll get these taken care of. We'll get it clear coated, and then we'll come back for that final layer of fade, and we'll be right back. Okay, so I'm done with the Tamiya rust powder. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with what's left in the mortar here of the brown we used earlier, and I'm just going to kind of do another level of blending here with that brown, trying to, you know, just touch up and not be wasteful with this brown color here. And I'm just going to kind of, you know, dab it on for the most part. It's not going to be super noticeable unless you're really up close. It's more, at this point, really an effort to not be wasteful and get that mortar clear for the final coat of fade that'll kind of just finish this project off, other than the patching itself, which we'll do at a later date. Alright, so we're now ready for the final step in weathering this car. We're going to go back in with one more layer just to fade it down, get rid of a little bit of that excess grime, and kind of blend in all the gashes and the rust, and really just bring this car completely together. I mean, it's the same mixture as earlier, just a little bit of white, a little bit of gray, and you'll see as I kind of start to apply it, it really does kind of just bring the car back together. Anything that was loud and kind of standing out a second ago is now kind of blending in and looking like it's been on this car for you know, the longest time it could have possibly been. Overall, I think this has been a pretty nice weathering video. Pretty happy with the way it turned out. I thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned, and we'll have some pictures of the final product of this car. Thanks for watching. Again, please subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one.
Just you make sure you're keeping your loving pure, 'cause for you know